Hello, everyone, and welcome back. James Williams, Director of Programs with MEF, and thank you to Guillermo from Omdia for a fantastic framing of the DCB opportunity, because it is an opportunity. It's not without its challenges, but those are most definitely going to be addressed. And actually closing off the end of the day is going to be a fantastic session, bringing into play so many MEF members talking about what really needs to be done to bring DCB into the crosshair, shall we say, of the average consumer around the world and getting them to use DCB as a payment method. Now, talking about that and consumers, I'd like to bring on Dario Betti, MEF CEO. Hi, Dario.
Hi there. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Nice
Hello.
to
Great to have you. No, great to have you with us. Great that you could join. So, MEF CEO, Dario, you've had plenty of experience yourself over the years as an analyst and with mobile operators as well, and have worked in the area of mobile payments. But can you just set the scene with our consumer research and what we've been doing at MEF over the years?
Yes, we have the pleasure of running for the last 8 years market research on users of smartphones, our consumers. You're right, I was looking at it as an analyst many years ago, but that's prehistory. I mean, it's like talking about dinosaurs by now. In fact, love to present and share some of the slides. I think some of them will probably come straight away now. Why? Well, you know, it's a chat, James. I'd like to get you to think. This data is available for all of our members to review and discuss, and it's across multiple factors. But I've picked some of those trends, and maybe it makes sense. If you're watching online and live, you probably just heard from Omdia Guillermo Escofé giving a very nice view about how the industry is changing, how much of the industry is changing. Actually, I was taking notes, very exciting. But here we look at the consumers, and interestingly, there are some plenty of similarities in what we are probably identifying. Well, first of all, however, before I go into any of the details, with the serious research, we do it with our own device research and additional analysts that help us to get out of it. It's 6,500 users in 10 different countries, both of the 10 different markets we covered. And because we've been kept in for so many years, we now sit on an interesting history of that. And James, part of the history, and I'd like to reflect with you, is the pandemic. Well, we need to mention it still. COVID-19, as much as we would like to forget that, has changed digital transformation. It's been one of those things that really pushed forward. But it could have been a blip. It could have been just a few, desperations of using services only to realize that later on, I'm not going to be using it. Now, plenty of information on this screen, starting from the left, which is the most important one, which is, are you as a user still using your mobile phone more or less as a result of a pandemic? And remember, this is now something that we're talking about 2022. Most of the countries had really, except of China, moved away from some of the stricter regulation as well. And 62% of them said are definitely using more. That's a very clear indication. Whereas a third that says no change, but only 6% was using less. And what is more marked is actually that the frequency is also increasing. So it's not just, and the services penetration is increasing. So look at one side or another, it's really truly a more engaged consumers using services. Does that surprise you, James?
It doesn't surprise me in the least, Dario. And if you look at the increases in the various countries, particularly in the developing countries here, looking at India, South Africa, and then we're talking Brazil as well, and to ever so slightly to lesser degree China. We had a session yesterday looking at the whole area of South Africa. South Africa, population of 60 million people. So much of the population is less than 19 years old. So it's a truly developing country, and it's mobile first. And in these countries, mobile money, mobile payments have actually been totally at the forefront, as opposed to anything on the fixed networks, the fixed line side of things. So that does not surprise me as well. And some more research, and indeed, I saw this quite a bit during the RCS World event and many subsequent posts on LinkedIn, on other channels as well. Research has shown multiple times that people's attention span has actually decreased even less. So various research shows where people's attention span used to be the princely sum of 11 seconds. They actually focused on something before making the decision, am I interested? Am I not so interested? Shall I move on? That has actually decreased to 8 seconds today. So therefore, the number of interactions people are going to be having with mobile will have increased for a number of reasons, but also just the basic attention span side of things is going to be a factor.
Well, we didn't measure that, the attention span.
No, but it's just something we've been seeing from other MEF members and their own research generally, which all feeds into the whole area of the consumer.
What we might do in future, because but you have touched on one of the biggest trend we've seen from this massive amount of data we have, which is that two different speed in the world. There's the mobile first countries. They're really embracing and engaging even more now in digital transformation. Some people might even say that they're starting to get a true advantage or building an advantage over the years. So if we are sitting in not the mobile first countries, maybe we need to look at what the impact on our economy or education, our productivity levels are. It's going to be. But I want to go back to payments as well, because there was probably the introductions. And here it is, some of the good news. And it's not surprising news because we mentioned that year on year, if you remember with this category specifically. There are some changes, you could probably say. So the biggest category for mobile phone is listening to music, something that payments would be much appreciated. Social media, advertising base, is the second biggest service category. And the third is now games. If you go back to last year and the year before, you might remember that games was the biggest applications. So the only place where we've seen a bit of a reduction, COVID might have fueled a lot of use and probably deflated a bit. It's games. We're going to have an entire report on games, what people do. So there is a lot of things happening there. So probably this is a bit of a simplistic view. But music is really working. And with music is an entire category for payments. And, they're all coming to a very nice 60s result, and video 62%. And with that, these are not massive growth, right? It's what we've seen is a 1 to 2% and more every year. Slightly, it takes little to shuffle the work. This is the mature part of the data and specific consumer services. But this is probably the surprising bit, and this is really the payment bit, because there's a much increased usage of mobile payment services. So if you're content services, you've already developed, you're already reaching your 60s, if not 70s soon. But look at the 12 percentage point increase from last year on ordering a product. People used to think that it was crazy ordering something on your mobile phone. You would go on a big computer and to finish up. Now people do buy on Amazon and everything else on their mobile phone. That's at 54% of our smartphone use globally. Again, look at the differences in mobile first in our countries, but the global figure is still very impressive as well. But another big jumper is ordering food delivery. Now, that category did not exist 5 years ago. Effectively, it was a process almost unheard of. And now almost 1 in 2 have at some point ordered some food via the mobile phone. Something we've seen growing a lot is the financial services and banking, but now it doesn't grow as much. Since last year, it's flat. But again, a nice big increase on another payment, and this time is transfer, sending money to a friend. And that's a 9 percentage point, huge increase in something else. All of this is really what payments, digital wallets, and the entire bigger family. So the biggest messages I get for people listening right now is your customer seems to be much more willing and have been experimented some more. As a matter of fact, payments is probably the biggest surprise of growth after the pandemic, and financial services you've seen during the pandemic. So that's a really big story. So if you're working in this area, well, congratulations, you're probably starting to see a lot of traffic. Interesting what we heard this morning, and I refer again to our companion from Omdia presentation, go back to Guillermo Escofet, that money probably is not shared equally. So there are some things, there are certain things that are happening in different ways. But anyway, another and James, probably something else that did not surprise you so far, as I suspect. That's you've seen, have you taken the pulse of that growth, have you?
I have. So if you look at myself and what I've been doing through COVID, it's safe to say that the delivery drivers from the various courier companies were perhaps, well, not were perhaps, they were the most frequently seen individuals visiting my house for a couple of years. I have to admit that that trend has remained the same, and I'm sure I'm not alone with regards to the retail side of things as well. And also on the mobile payment side of things, all of us will have experienced this personally as well, with a number of organizations using the opportunity. And again, I refer back to something I mentioned and a quote from Winston Churchill: never let the opportunity of a good crisis go to waste. And there are a number of organizations out there who have now said, we're not allowing payments in cash. We only accept card payments or mobile payments or online payments, and we don't accept payments in cash because, of course, for organizations to handle cash, and it's a global thing, it costs them a lot of money generally to do that. So that has been another factor pushing people, I think, to the mobile payments side of things. But definitely the goods and services from an online store, you had so many people who never previously would have thought in a million years of doing that, were forced to do that. I'm thinking particularly people of an older generation. So absolutely, we saw that last year in our survey results. And I think we will definitely see that trend continuing with our older demographics switching more to the world of online. And indeed, all of you out there involved in creating online content, there's going to be a great market for content, not just aimed at those between 16 and 24, but for the older demographics too. So that's just something I think personally to watch out for as well. But the bundling is something Guillermo talked about. It's something I'm going to be looking at with Docomo Digital on their sponsor session a little later. But the intelligent and smart bundling of goods and services is absolutely key, and has shown in countries such as China, where we've constantly been seeing China and the likes of Japan too being amongst the leaders in direct carrier billing uptake, and successful bundling has been absolutely at the heart of that success, as well as, of course, some regulatory aspects, which unsurprisingly we'll be covering very soon as well.
No surprise. But then if you're looking for some of this data, again, if you're members, you're going to get plenty of. We will come back to some of the details on, as we're saying, the countries, the people, the age groups. We actually have something there. And I've seen a comment from Mofadal, which was referring to channels and new channels. You might see some of that here. You can see how some of the Netflix and Spotify, if that's a new channel for you, is actually pretty well received and using mobile payments. 38% subscription services, it was referred in the previous presentation as well. Open it, and if you can look at some of the details in smaller fonts, but you can see how that is spread, and it's kind of a perception. Sometimes it's difficult to discerning, but are you using your credit cards or mobile to pay, or a digital wallet, or using your bill? Yeah, as you can see, the first two categories can be sometimes difficult because they are coexisting, but in the Netflix, the new channels, they do have quite an affinity on the bundling. Slightly, it's still not the majority. That's a 19%. It's one of the strongest categories for bundling. But debit card is there. It's still the majority. And that's driven very much by the old-fashioned world as well, and the Western world. But it's not only there. Takeaway, well, if you're paying ticketing services and parking, that's where the digital wallet comes really into place, 44%, but also in the mobile apps where things are really, then you really have your direct carrier billing. 23% are happy to add that to the bill. That's the strongest thing. Over digital wallet, as well as goods and services from a shop. That's one I had to understand a bit. I think there's an entire discussion we need to have, how you pay for goods and services from a shop on a mobile phone. Is your wallet is your credit card? It's well, exactly, because both, as we were saying, both can be both. It can be. It's a question of
one is linked to the
perception.
other. One is linked to the other. Yeah.
In some cases, it's really pre-monia added to that. In some cases, it's questions of what do you think. But so I think in terms of channels, you've got plenty to see in the sermon. But back to the question of Fanal, I think there is new applications are really using these channels pretty well. But here we're talking about consumers. So I should probably focus back on the consumers and talking about not the good things, but also the bad one. And you already mentioned, James, so that you've talked about it and you will talk about this, which is what our the concerns for our users on smartphones. And number one is my payment details being stolen, 33%. So I take over accounts. Unauthorized also charges, 32%, pretty close. And then comes the nicer one, so to speak, that are so easy that I will spend without realizing it, something you can think of. But subscribing to something without realizing, so some sort of uneasy information or no barriers to or overbilling, incorrect amount. So 3 of them are really industry-wise. The payments it's still being stolen, future payments unauthorized, and the overbilling. The real story is only 21% of people say they're not worried about anything. So there is no, not so good as 79% of people that are worried about something. And the second element is that worrying is not getting lower, is actually getting worse. So change year on year from last year, plus 3 percentage point, plus 4 percentage point, plus 5 percentage point. That's a situation where people are not yet. And again, countries' differences come look at the data. But overall, globally, we haven't made people feeling easier at rest with this. And I think here, James, you will be talking about that. The industry needs to do something.
We will. I think, but being worried about something, because it could be means you're concerned about something, but also that means you're aware of an issue. And I think we know there has been an increase in telecoms fraud in general, but telecoms fraud covers so many areas, not just payments related. And there are many organizations out there doing a much better job of making people more aware of fraudulent practices out there, what to watch out for, what not to do online as well. And as there is more awareness and publicity of it, then there becomes more concern, because quite frankly, there were so many who actually weren't aware of the risks. And again, I go back to possibly the older generation who are new to all of this. So there's plenty of work for MEF members and indeed the whole industry to do in terms of awareness, but being worried about something, as long as it doesn't reach that tipping point where people stop using a channel, they're so concerned, then I think there is a slight silver lining in that there's a much higher level of awareness.
Fair point. And again, James, as you were saying, for all the members, I mean, not just for members, but members have got access to all the data. So you can look at data in countries, and there are many differences. But that's probably what you're also referring to. Is it an obstacle? So this triangle, it might take a few seconds to understand why it works, but it's only 3 categories, and we compare, which are speed of use, safety, and convenience, which are some of the 3 key elements for payments we've been describing for so long. And 3 different areas. One is adding to my mobile bill, direct carrier billing, digital wallets, and your old credit and debit cards. Now, the debit and credit cards, the old-fashioned debit and credit cards, seems to have an advantage across all of them. Call it your, trust in what you know best as well. And that's a bit disappointing for the DCB, which people are not considering particularly safe in comparison to others, similarly to the digital wallets. But the other 2 go almost hand in hand. So it looks like for some of these channels, the old-fashioned and not so convenient, because after all, I was surprised to say that it's considered most convenient when realistically it's your long digit codes and multiple different inputs fields is not very easy or convenient in some situations. However, I should also tell you that we've done another study as well, we looked at the same study, but we looked just at the USA college students and why you could challenge that assumption, but that's one of the most exposed to digital services, has got money to spend, has got education. It could be kind of your future customers. Maybe not, but let's play with it. And you can see that here things are pretty much all the way around. So for the USA college students, we have having to pay mobile bill and digital wallet as some of the fastest and some of the safest options. You got there. Surprisingly, it's still very convenient to use your debit and credit card. So my point still challenges. I said, I still not sure why would be. So we'll come back and ask that in future to our users. I don't know if we have a lot of time, but I have a bit more, James, if you're happy to share.
We have 5 minutes, no problem.
So, sorry about that. I think something happened in our PDF, and now we got countries on top of something. But if you could read it, look at the colors. And again, look how the colors, the yellow one will be the most advanced, or the one that I've taken up, or considering these perceived fast convenience or safety as the highest point. And it is Brazil, China, India, and South Africa where it points out. So again, it was the same point you were making before. Say it's mobile first is still the perception, the highest perception for direct carrier billing happens to that. And I would keep on referring to the other presentation, which listen to it as well from India. After all, it was saying Asia Pacific is one of the mobile first continent. Is going to be a very big place for direct carrier billing. I think there's an opportunity as well as a challenge. I mean, the opportunity is really you got countries where that people are waiting for and doing that, and waiting for payments and doing payments. But if you are in US and Europe, shouldn't you think, can you change some of this perception? Isn't that our challenge? Why not to use it in this country as well? What has changed dramatically not to make it like that? But then we will see about that. And James, you mentioned it before, but do you want to go through some of the demographic difference?
Yeah, I will do. So actually, just going back to your previous slide, if you could roll back one thing, one really strange anomaly here is Japan, who we know are one of the highest users of the consumers out there, use mobile payments and indeed direct carrier billing, some of the most frequently in the whole world. Yet only, if you look at how low the percentage of people who've mentioned, oh, it's safe, is 17%. That's actually the lowest out there, which is very surprising. And I think that's a real outlier. And if you compare that to its neighbor next door to the left, so its neighbors, you've got India 47% and South Africa 35%. You're thinking, wow, does that mean they don't think it's safe? I think it's rather the opposite, that actually they're so comfortable with it, they don't perceive it so much as being risk. Because out in Japan, you can practically buy anything you want, for example, from Amazon, basically up to whatever the cost is, several $1,000s, pounds, whatever you want to call it, and add it to your phone bill. So there aren't the constraints we have within the EU or within the UK in terms of amounts there. So that for me was a little anomaly. Sorry about taking you back at that slide, but that was
no problem.
An anomaly.
And I think, and that's the anomaly. What I think for some of us, Japan is the anomaly in general. It's still the countries where cash is really loved and keen. It's a country where technically the choices are multiple. The uptake of some of the choices, because remember, there's a lot of fragmentation as well. Interestingly, with some of the carriers we know very well, have got a very strong position, have done a lot around it. But it's a bit more complex sometimes than we understand. And again, if you look at Japan, it changes dramatically with how much you earn, where you live, urban, and the kind of demographic you are. However, it is surprisingly conservative, mostly, in terms of adoption even of payments. Despite what we might think externally, I would say the reality, there's much more happening, a lot of more interesting things than technically, and lots of adoption, but not necessarily the same level of excitement you might find in first.
Totally agree. And in Europe, with Germany, they still like cash in Germany, and Switzerland in particular as well. So still a lot of love. So you've got the traditional elements along with the new merged together.
Yeah, you'll have to stop me because I'll keep on going and trying to squeeze points, James. But I think some other lenses that I encourage everybody to look at, which it's really male-female, which you wouldn't expect it, but it is significant on such a large sample. Female are more at ease in general on some of the key areas of convenience for direct car billing. I really like the fact that it's so convenient. And they also, interestingly, not so sure it is safe. So you've got a couple of things that work very well. These are your customers will love to use, but they don't feel it's safe as sustainable. So here we go. Some more food for thought. I don't think I have a conclusion here. But again, I think for use age as well as gender to identify some of these trends in some of the countries specifically. That's where things start to make more sense. And by the way, complicated slides, but it is not just your youth that likes direct carrier billing. Actually, it turns out that sometimes also because of the lack of funds might not be the one that really think it's also easy. But you have what was the youth 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that have kind of grown into it. So if you got your 25 to 34, or even now your 35 to 44, these young people, as I still like to call them, they're all young, but they have really got a real appetite for these services. And look at even at those oldies, like a 45 to 54, no, still young, extremely young. But they, in terms of convenience, they do get it. Now, there is a big drop by the time you reach a 55 plus. Things are not so easy anymore. And I think the geographically, historically, you can actually see how that fits a certain patterns on mobility and using of services and so on. What have they been exposed in the past? But very important, once we start talking about getting to the next million of users in a certain market, to understand who they are really and what kind of challenges they might have. And I think, again, you need to use all these different lenses at the same time.
100%.
What do you think so far? Did I answer some of the questions? I have some more information.
Dario, our time is up, believe it or not. On to the next session.
I'm eating into other people's presentations, but all to tell you that there is much more out there. So be your own guide and go download the report, which we're going to have soon, but even more probably, most importantly, the full set of data so you can make your comparison.
That's fantastic. Exactly. So as MEF members, you get access to the full report and the raw data set as well to do with as you want. Dario, thank you for joining us. And next up, we're going to be looking at the important area of regulation. Catch you back soon. Thank you.